Hello, I'm Steve Davis, and welcome to episode 356 of the Adelaide Show podcast. A few years ago, in the middle of the night, I had an episode in which I fainted, fell down and hit my head, and discovered later that it was just centimetres away, the point of impact, from actually being fatal. I spent the next day in hospital being observed and prodded and tested and so on and so forth. But when I hopped in the taxi to come home, about 24 hours later, I was struck by how the world had not changed. I'd just spent 24 hours meditating on mortality and the profound changes that would mean to the people around me, but the world just kept marching on. As it should. As it always does. If you've ever visited someone, particularly in hospital, or said goodbye to them as they've passed away, you would have been struck by this as well, as you emerge from your place of mourning and grief to see the world whipping by, buses still striving to stay on time, etc. Nothing changes. For Ukrainians around the world, there would be a collective sense of this. From February 2022, when Vladimir Putin launched an illegal, vicious war against Ukraine, the world kept moving on. Now, my beloved former colleagues in the Fourth Estate, in journalism, they gave coverage to begin with because there was explosions and they had a chance to put on those wonderful, stern, grave faces and pretend like they're real news people for a little while. But soon after, a celebrity goes topless or a politician mixes up their words in a press conference and off they rush like little puppies looking for that fun distraction. I can understand they are under economic pressure and editorial pressure to get more clicks, get more eyeballs or ears, because that's how they keep the lights on. But I also believe that our Fourth Estate has a moral responsibility, if it is to be worthy of being the Fourth Estate, to keep in front of us things of profound importance. What's happening with Russia invading Ukraine is absolutely profound. The fact that its coverage seeps away and is hardly mentioned for days on end these days is an abdication of responsibility. If journalists can't find a way to make the immediacy and the importance of it front and centre for us, they're not doing their job. They're not being given the right incentives. And I'd love to see that change, because what is happening up there is at the same level of profundity as World War II, with the ramifications this can wreak across the world. It would be like we're living during World War II and the newspapers just running a little poll in perhaps, the Adelaide Confidential section on what brand of cigar should Winston Churchill be smoking? What are your views, etc. So there is a frustration, I feel, with that. So we address that in this episode by taking time out to sit down with Natalya Boujenko. She's a Ukrainian expat. She's been living in Adelaide for a while now, and she takes us through some of the history of Ukraine, which is very complex. Get a sense of contemporary Ukraine, get inside information on what it really is like living there through her cousins and family who are still in Ukraine. And then give us a glimmer of hope and some direction on what we can do if we want to be engaged in some meaningful way.
How I feel about it? It's how all Ukrainians feel about this. There is not a single Ukrainian on this earth who doesn't feel devastated. That feeling of horror, that feeling of death, that feeling that genocide is occurring as we speak and we can't stop it, that helplessness, it's just so overwhelming. Majority of us are in depression or dealing with really dark thoughts. Majority of us having very existential, heavy thoughts about how to proceed, what's the meaning of life, what do I need to do? Because our existence as a nation, as our identity is Someone is trying to ruin all of that and obliterate it is the right word. There's not a day that goes by that I don't spend at least 2 hours checking the news, finding out all of the recent statistics, or do something from in volunteering capacity to improve the situation. And so there is a lot that we have done to help refugees who came to Adelaide, but also raising funds and sending money across to Ukraine. So we did fundraisers at, for example, Warm Adelaide. We've raised around $30,000. It was incredible. It's really hard when you have a teenager who is 15, came to Warm Adelaide for the first time in their life and pulls out a $5 from their pocket and gives it for the benefit of Ukraine. So it's that. So people would share what they have because they know it's evil and evil needs to be fought. And that's how it's been. And look, it's been months and emotionally it still is really difficult to live and to go on day to day. So that's the hardest part.
I'm hearing you say the words, and I'm feeling the sense of the emotion, but it's hard to really get it. It really is hard.
Okay, Steve, imagine one morning you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and because somebody is bombing your street, your neighborhood, and they're just not sending one missile, it will be a carpet of missiles until your entire suburb razed to the ground and nothing is left. And hundreds of people will die underneath the rubble of the falling houses. That's what it's like every day. And Russians are bombing not just one city, but multiple cities at any given time. So every morning I wake up and I check the news, and you find out about a shopping center that got bombed, or a 9-story apartment block that is bombed, or a school or a university every day. And so every day 20 to 40 to 60 civilians are dead and buried. I remember once opening the phone and looking at this photo of this 6-year-old who died in her bed during the bombing because of the rubble falling on her. And then she was lying in her bed with her blonde hair. And I have a daughter who looks from the back exactly the same. And you look at this and you think, God, there's civilians that Russia is bombing day in, day out, because they're trying to instill horror so that Ukrainian army will retreat and be forced to the negotiating table and give up its territories. But we know that they came in 2013 and 14 and they took Crimea and they tried to take Luhansk, Donetsk, and it won't stop because their objective is to actually capture the entire country, not just parts of it. So they're taking bit and bit at a time and annexing it through bogus referendums. It's shocking.
That separation between money and journalism no longer exists. In fact, it's closed to zero. If you walk into any modern newsroom now, what you'll see is a big board with all of the top stories on that are online, and next to each of those stories is a figure for the number of engagements that story has. And if you're a journalist sitting there and you can see that your story is not doing so well, you can see that if you change the headline, you can instantly see the change in the number of engagements, and that means a change in revenue because your display ads are going to get more views, and that means that your story will generate more income. And that tighter connection between views and journalism has effectively meant that we now, as I said a few moments ago, we prioritize those things that are going to grab readers' attention in ways that I think seriously undermine the journalistic principles. Let me give you an example. I also drive the way that editors think. I remember there was a headline, I think it was in the Daily Telegraph from Sydney some time back, about, I've forgotten exactly what it was, but it was a story about how US sailors who are arriving at Garden Island at the Navy base are jumping on Tinder to hook up with Sydney girls. And they'd sent out a couple of their attractive female reporters to jump on Tinder and to hook up with these guys. And it was a ridiculous story, but it was see here, just read how US sailors are hooking up with Aussie girls. I still felt quite grubby, but I clicked through on that story.
Right.
But as an editor, if you're sitting there as an editor and you're trying to work out how do I deploy my journalist, I can send my journalist out to do some deep investigation into corruption in the Sydney City Council, and I can produce a story that will generate some clicks, but really it's going to take them 2 weeks to do it, and I'll get questionable engagement. But if I send my reporter out to jump on Tinder for an afternoon, I'll come back with a story that I just know will generate huge amounts of attention. Now, as an editor trying to keep my newspaper alive and trying to keep my staff employed and keep my bosses happy, how am I going to make those editorial decisions? Which way am I going to go, really? I would like to be able to do those investigations, but I know that it's the Tinder story that's going to help bring in the revenue.
We need to unpack some terms as we go through today.
So sure will be.
Let's start with erotic friction.
Or sexual tension.
Oh, okay. That's what you mean by that, which is wondering. Nothing's a given. You don't know what's going to happen. Is that what?
It's a dance of polarity.
Oh.
So you need to be able to dance with the opposite energies of each partner. It's a big myth that sexual chemistry or the spark is something that happens naturally. It doesn't. It takes conscious effort to make sure that you're cultivating erotic friction so that you're not mistaking merely being opportunistic with being spontaneous.
So why in the early first liaisons with someone does it not seem to be something that you need to deliberate over and work hard at?
Because you are coming with their... no,
that's fine. Get ready. There is going to be a lot of that.
When you first meet somebody, there is a lot of space. You don't know that person. You're getting to know that person. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue with that person. And you are putting in a lot of effort to find out about this person. And that's where the feel-goods, the endorphins that are released in the body, it's a bit false as well, because those natural endorphins are things that we constantly chase because we say things like, I remember when, we used to do this and we used to do that. This is why erotic friction and sexual tension is something that needs to be worked on. When you first met, it was done for you.
And then when you get used to just just expecting and kind of knowing, like watching an old movie for the 17th time, you don't laugh at all the jokes necessarily. You know what's coming around the corner.
True.
Is that what you're saying?
That's why relationships lose the spark, because you're more like best friends than you are lovers.
Something like 75% of what we consume in the way of food or drinks have added sugar. And if we look at the most common additive, which is sucrose or table sugar, is what we stir in our tea and coffee, 50% of sucrose is glucose, and the body handles that very nicely. And about the other half is fructose. Mm-hmm. So fructose is actually not recognized as a food by the body. It doesn't trigger the release of insulin. It actually suppresses our appetite control system. And when it's absorbed into the bloodstream, the majority of it's taken up by the liver, and about a third is converted immediately to fat. So it's actually very toxic to the liver and toxic to the body. I see the look of surprise on your face because you're probably thinking, fructose, isn't that healthy?
Yes. Isn't fructose the naturally occurring sugar in fruit?
Yeah, so fructose is what gives sugary products their sweet flavour, including fruit. But if you then look at, let's say, an orange.
Yes.
Eat an orange is a pleasurable experience. It's sweet. But when you have the orange, you're also eating the fibre as a part of that. Mm-hmm. And the fibre has a very important role. It actually creates the satiety we were talking about before, make you feel satisfied. So there's no way you could sit down and eat the 3 or 4 oranges that would take to squeeze in order to make a glass of orange juice. But the fibre also has a very important impact in terms of our metabolism. It reduces the absorption of fructose into the bloodstream.
Oh.
So nature has packaged up fruit with the poison, which is fructose, and the antidote, which is the fibre. So I love that way of describing it. So you're better off, people often ask me, is it okay to consume fruit? Well, in this household now, we tend to consume the low-sugar fruits, but every now and then, an orange is fabulous, but eat the whole orange, not the juice.
Yes.
Adelaide.